Well,
Recording in progress.
okay, I'd like to declare a quorum and call the meeting to order. I will now ask our clerk, Anushka Kargathara, to please call roll for attendance.
Councillor Simpson.
Good morning, President.
Councillor Nolan.
Present. Good morning.
Councillor Lewis.
Present.
And President Peterson is excused, and then Councillor Gonzalez will be late. Thank you.
Great. And before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
Hi, I'm Justin Dunlap, and I'm the department head stagehand electrician at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall. Safety's a big part of my job. From electrical, making sure that I stay up to date on the NFPA codes and regulations, to rigging, where we make sure that everything is safely suspended overhead, to egress, ensuring that our audiences, performers, and technicians have the safest possible route in case of emergency. I'm out here at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, and you're in the Metro Regional Center. Please note that we're on the 3rd floor of the building. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the steps to the 2nd floor and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk. We will meet in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue.
Okay, well, let's move on to our first agenda item, which is for Loan for Memorial Design. I'm excited to be with you during the tail end of AAPI Heritage Month and to introduce our next agenda item, the Memorial Project at Block 14 of Lone Fir Cemetery. This project is deeply important, and for me personally, I was actually in Taipei, Taiwan last week at the funeral of my grandmother and got to experience many of the same ceremonies that happened at Block 14. So just really thrilled that we've been able to create this process and memorial and to have community members provide feedback into the final design. So today we have several community members joining us today, and we are thankful for their efforts to elevate the council's awareness of this project. We also want to recognize the contribution of those who came before, including past and current Lone Fir Cemetery Foundation members of the Oregon Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, and former Governor and Metro Councilor Barbara Roberts. This project wouldn't be where it is today without their tireless energy, passion, and dedication. Over the past 18 months, I have participated in several of the community engagement events and listened to community members' aspirations for this project and their reflections on the process. I want to thank Metro staff and the design team for creating an inclusive process that resulted in people feeling heard and reflected in the design. So I am very personally excited for the council to see the latest designs today, which reflect the direction provided by that robust engagement process and has been well received by community. Although we are hearing this item at a work session, I'd like to emphasize that the designs before us today were informed by community voices and have been well received by that community. Today's presentation is a time to come together and appreciate this memorial rather than to recommend changes. Lastly, with so much societal and political tension nationally and locally, I'm proud that this Metro Council has prioritized this important work, and I'm proud that we are recognizing marginalized people buried at Lone Fir and that we are telling their stories with authenticity. And finally, we're working towards creating a place that will foster understanding and healing. With that, I'll turn it over to John Blasher, our Parks and Nature Director.
Do I need to turn the mic on? Or is it set? Great. Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong and Metro Councilors. For the record, John Blasher, he, him, his, Parks and Nature Director. Thank you, Councilor Wong, for kicking us off this morning, as well as your leadership and engagement in this important project. We're really happy to meet with you all today and provide an update on some of the important work being done to create a memorial that will recognize marginalized people buried at Lone Fir Cemetery. Metro has invested in a regional system of parks, trails, and natural areas with nature at its heart for more than 25 years. This system now includes thousands of acres of parks and natural areas, as well as 14 historic cemeteries and a system of trails in between. In addition to being a place to inter and to pay respects to generations of Oregonians, Metro cemeteries function as green spaces, appreciated by both people and wildlife. Lone Fir is Portland's second largest arboretum, as well as one of Oregon's most treasured historic places. Thanks to council leadership and direction, $4 million from the Parks and Nature Bond has gone towards prioritizing the memorial at Lone Fir, something that community has long sought to advance. Metro's Parks and Nature Bond is making clear progress in building on decades of investments in the region, and the Lone Fir Memorial Project is a great example of bringing that 2019 bond's criteria and principles to life, especially its commitment to meaningful and community engagement and ensuring that Metro sites reflect community visions and priorities. Racial equity and meaningful community engagement are pillars of that 2019 Parks and Nature Bonds, and those values have led Metro Parks and Nature to focus on carrying out our promise of equitably honoring for the Chinese American communities at Block 14 and in recognition of the Oregon Health Institute patients at Block 10. We're excited to share with you more today about the future of the Lone Fir Memorial today. And with that, I'm going to pass it to our project manager, Karen Vitkay.
Is this thing on? Yes.
I think so.
Okay.
I think all the mics are on.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Vitkay. You can use she, her pronouns for me. I'm a planner with Parks and Nature and have the pleasure of serving as the project manager for the memorial project at Lone Fir Cemetery. You can advance to the next slide. For everyone's orientation, Lone Fir Cemetery is located in southeast Portland between Southeast Stark and Morrison Streets and Southeast 20th and 26th. Formerly opened in 1855, Lone Fir is the oldest continuously operating cemetery in the Portland area. It is on the National Register of Historic Places and is a sacred space where tens of thousands of people are buried. Next slide. The site of the memorial project is called Block 14 on cemetery maps and is outlined in red on this slide. At just over an acre in size, the block served as the Chinese section of the cemetery since at least 1887 and quite likely much earlier than that. Even from this aerial view, we can see that the southwest corner of the cemetery looks different than the rest of the cemetery. This is due to a long history of discrimination towards Chinese people, both by the cemetery industry and government agencies. And now to share, next slide, about the significance of this project, I'd like to turn it over to a couple community partners, starting with Neil Lee.
Good morning. My name is Neil Lee, and I identify as an American-born Chinese American. I was born and raised in Portland. I am an architect by profession, but I have a passion for community service, particularly representing the Chinese community. I am currently active with various committees and councils, including neighborhood associations and city agencies. Today, I'm representing the community as the president of the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association. The CCBA is a nonprofit organization that serves all Chinese people living in Oregon and Southwest Washington. Our mission is to provide programs in support of its core values, promote and preserve Chinese culture, respect and honor our ancestors, advance educational opportunities, promote civic engagements, and advocate for social justice. The CCBA was established in Portland in 1911 to organize the local Chinese Tongs and family associations to better support the Chinese community in their struggle to find housing, work, and live in America during the Chinese Exclusion Act. We provided assistance for the community to navigate the laws of the land, provide a community center for entertainment, and even acted as a courthouse to settle disputes within the Chinese community. The CCBA, in a sense, was a quasi-governmental agency and represented the Chinese community to the City of Portland and other state and federal agencies. In more recent times, the CCBA has made significant iconic contributions to the City of Portland. In 1985, the CCBA leadership led a delegation with city officials to the Republic of China to create Portland's Chinatown Gate. When erected in 1986, Portland's Chinatown Gate was the largest gate in the United States. A year later, the CCBA helped establish the Portland Kaohsiung Sister City Association, which in turn established the Portland Rose Festival Dragon Boat Races in 1989, the first traditional dragon boat race event held in the United States. Jumping back to the early 1900s, when 11% of Portland's population were made up of Chinese immigrants, one of the many projects the CCBA conducted was to assist Chinese immigrants travel to and from the United States, which included returning the bodies of the deceased back to China, a cultural protocol at the time. The CCBA provided this service throughout Oregon in the early 1900s. Of special interest is the work the CCBA conducted at the Chinese cemetery at Lone Fir. During this time, the CCBA managed the southwest corner of the cemetery, which was segregated for burials for the Chinese community. To further elaborate on the turbulent story of the Chinese cemetery at Lone Fir, I will now defer my colleague and fellow CCBA board member, Marcus Lee.
Thank you, Neil. As Neil mentioned, my name is Marcus Lee, and along with a few other members of our group, Lone Fir Cemetery Foundation, have been involved with the project since the get-go, and I've been asked to give a brief overview of the history of the project at this point. Block 14, within 1873 and 1927, based on research provided by the group that Metro is contracted with, saw burials of more than 2,800 Chinese over time. And a lot of that's due to the fact that there were disinterments and plots would be reused for the newly deceased. In 1917, we saw the first large-scale disinterment of Chinese remains for journey back to China as per tradition. The CCBA was in charge of overseeing projects like this. They would send notices out through the Pacific Northwest, throughout Oregon, to different communities to inform them that there's going to be a shipment of remains back to China, and that if they had any burials in their cemeteries that were scheduled for return, that they needed to be shipped to Portland by a specific date so they don't miss the boat. In 1928, Multnomah County takes possession of Lone Fir Cemetery. Jump forward to 1948, we see the second significant disinterment as mandated by Multnomah County. They had other plans for the property and asked that the Chinese community remove any further remains in Block 14. So typically what would happen is the remains would be shipped back to Hong Kong. Hong Kong was kind of the transit point from overseas Chinese locations mainly back to the mainland. Unfortunately, during that period of time, the borders were closed due to a number of issues, one of which was the Japanese invasion of Hong Kong during World War II and the change in political structure in mainland China. So they closed the border. There needed to be a storage facility once the remains were dropped off in Hong Kong. That was a stopping point, and then arrangements needed to be made to transfer them to their respective villages. So they needed a place to be able to hold the remains temporarily. A group called the Donghua Hospital Group created the Donghua Coffin Home where they resided. And because the borders at that time had closed, they couldn't be transferred into the mainland. And a lot of those remains are still there. And you can see this in Ivy Lynn's documentary, Come Together Home, I believe was the title of it. She actually journeyed back to Donghua Coffin Home. In Portland, the disinterments were also assisted by a gentleman by the name of George Lee Reynolds, who was very important to the community. His story is very, very interesting. He was the manager of Caldwell's Colonial Mortuary, which was over by Northeast Sandy. The property was sold. The building's been torn down for housing, unfortunately. But he was, as an infant, he was abandoned in Chinatown. He was left on the doorstep of a Chinese family who raised him. And so he grew up with a local Chinese community here, learned the language, all the traditions, et cetera. So he knew the traditions of funerals, burials, et cetera. So he was involved in those processes during his time period. In 1953, 52, and 53, Multnomah County completes their maintenance building and the adjacent parking lot built over Block 14. In 1997, we see the transfer from Multnomah County of Block 14 to Metro. However, they transfer Lone Fir Cemetery over to Metro, but they retain ownership of Block 14. In 2004, the county considers selling Block 14 for development. The word was that a developer was going to put up condos. This prompted a public outcry from community members, neighborhood associations, Buckman Neighborhood Association, Friends of Lone Fir. They contact CCBA to alert us to the issue. And subsequently, one of our longtime members, Rebecca Liu, who was a CCBA member at that time, she locates the two ledgers that we saw up in the slides there earlier. The disinterment ledgers, they were dated 1917 and 1928 respectively, and they were titled Chinese Cemetery Register. And in those registers, in her overview and translation of some of the information, it showed that there were certain individuals that were not to be disinterred, and those traditionally the generation pretty much lineal, descended down through the father's lines. So typically it was just the men who were disinterred and sent back. So we knew there were still remains. The contrast was the fact that the information was written down, obviously all in Chinese. So we have names, we have locations of origins where, villages that some of these individuals came from, et cetera. And this is in contrast to other records that you would see from non-Chinese entities where almost all of those interred of Chinese descent were labeled as Chinamen, and so didn't have any names associated with them. It was at this time that then President Stephen King, Helen's husband, asked Rebecca and myself to stay involved with the project, to keep the CCBA informed, and she is in California, otherwise it would be nice to have her here today, but we, along with others, have been involved in the project since then. 2005, the county contracts with Archaeological Investigations Northwest to conduct the ground penetrating radar test within Block 14. Commissioner Maria Rojo de Estefe, who was a champion of the project, was deeply involved at the time. So these ground penetrating investigations turned up a number of anomalies. So with some exploratory digs, discovered things like shards of pottery, pieces of Ingape bottles. I hope I pronounced that correctly. They were, these little, you might have seen them, brown jugs that held Chinese wine, and those were very typical for in cemeteries in venerating the deceased. The tests were supposed to, the investigation was supposed to run for a couple of days. At the end of 2 days, they hadn't discovered any remains, and Commissioner Estefe asked for an additional day. And it's during that additional day that human remains were finally discovered under an asphalt parking area adjacent to the building. Subsequently, in 2005, the county demolishes the Morrison building and removes the parking surface. The county transfers the ownership of Block 14 to Metro 2007, which regains its rightful and historic position as part of the cemetery. Metro then formed the Block 14 work group, referred to as the Block 14 Initiative at Lone Fir, which is composed of a number of community stakeholders, again, the CCBA, CACA, the Chinese community, the mental health community, neighborhood groups, and other interested individuals. In 2008, after a process of community engagement, and with the assistance of the State of Oregon Historic Preservation Office, the Lone Fir Block 14 Memorial Master Plan was created. Metro then contracts with Lango Hansen Landscape Architects to come up with the initial memorial design. In 2011, that work group morphed into the Lone Fir Cemetery Foundation that allowed us to become a nonprofit organization through which we could then go out and try to raise funds until we found a solid base of funding, which happened in 2019 with voter approval of the renewal of Metro's Park and Nature Bond measure, in which Metro generously allocated a portion of the funds to the Block 14 Memorial, advancing the endeavor forward, much to the excitement and gratitude of our community. That brings us to the present day, and I didn't want to take up a lot of time for that because I'd like to give Michael as much time as he needs for his presentation, and Helen. But I do want to close with this wonderful quote from former governor and Metro Councilor Barbara Roberts. She said, "Cemeteries have so much to offer communities. We honor our ancestors by caring for their final resting place, but we must also not forget their stories. They are a mirror reflection of our past and a window to our future." Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus. I think we might be already over, so try to go fast here. And just want to say thank you to our counselor, and especially Counselor Duncan Hua for organizing this. So I'm Helen Ying, and I'm here today to actually share a few things with you with two hats on. One of the hats is as the Lone Fir Cemetery Foundation president, American Citizens Alliance, and was sharing about CCBA. I'm just sitting here thinking the founders of the Portland chapter of CCA probably also were the same folks who were involved with CCBA back then, because the Portland chapter was founded in 1921, and you said CCBA started in 1911, right? So CACA Portland is part of a national organization which was founded in 1895 in San Francisco, and it was founded at the backdrop of the child exclusion laws, and folks were looking to, find their space, right, and to seek for equal rights. And so that's what the CACA Portland mission is to develop leadership, serve the community, and promote civil rights. The reason why it was founded, as Marcus mentioned earlier, it really is to do very much of what Governor Roberts had shared in the quote. But at the same time, the inaugural project of the foundation is to support the construction of the Cultural Heritage and Healing Garden at Lone Fir. So today, as we said, we bring it to present day and where we are. So I just want to share with the counselors how exciting it is to be where we are today, knowing that in 2026, that this memorial will actually be completed. And my hope is that as we, create this memorial, that we will not only pay respect and honor those who are buried there and those who have been buried there and have gone unnoticed, but then it is also an opportunity for us to inform how we could act to make our future better as a whole and as a people of this country. And that when it opens, my hope is that it will allow visitors not only confront a painful chapter of the history, but to also imagine a future that is strengthened by illuminating the history of at last. So again, I want to thank the councilors for your support, because I think it was just a few years ago we came before you and advocated for your support to bring this project up to the top of projects to be completed. And so the Lone Fir Cemetery Foundation actually has an MOU with Metro. And among the many things within this MOU, as stakeholders, we want to help maintain community connections and enthusiasm during the design and construction phase of the garden and beyond. And then also with coordination with Metro, we want to help and recruit and encourage community members to participate in this project as throughout this process, and also to help raise funds, right, for the work that is going to be continuing after this project is done. Because we know, as I mentioned many times, where we are is just the beginning. It's not the end. And so I just want to share with you that we've already submitted 2 grant applications to benefit the project. And so I think we may have already gone through the couple of slides that I was supposed to refer to.
Go back.
What you're looking at right now is actually one of the things that, let's talk about this one here. So since 2022, as one of the ways for the foundation to help get enthusiasm behind this project, is that we've been holding what we call a Qingming gathering. So Qingming is a day where it literally means to clean the tombs, and so it's a day where in April, where the families would come together and go to the cemetery to clean the tombs and to pay respect to the ancestors. And so we took that opportunity, having the Qingming Day, and organize these gatherings at the Lone Fir Cemetery, where Block 14 is, and the site of the memorial. And you can see these are two pictures, one from this year and one from, I think it was the very first year in 2022. We also have pictures, but we can't show them all to you, of, the other, like 2023 as well. But what we're doing is inviting different folks to come. And so as you can see, this year, what we decided to do was partner with Friends of Lone Fir. And so they brought folks who would typically come to, you all probably know that there are tours that the Friends of Lone Fir would do every Saturday. And so they brought one of the groups to come and learn about the significance of the memorial that will be built on Block 14. So, and then the next slide shows a gathering that the Chinese American Citizens Alliance Portland chapter organized, where we talked about the Chinese American history here in Oregon as well as in the country. And this is called the 1882 Project Celebration and Educational Event. The idea behind it is 1882 is when the Exclusion Act was passed, but in 2011, we got Congress to apologize for passing those laws. And since then, we've been doing these annual events to educate the broader public about Chinese American history as well as contributions. And this past year in 2023, we actually invited Michael Yan, the lead designer for the memorial, to come and talk about the history as well as what's going to be, be built here at this Block 14 in the memorial. So I'm now going to give the time back as we talk more about this project.
All right, thank you, Helen. Thanks to all of our partners for sharing a bit about community enthusiasm for the project and the history and how we're so much looking forward to the future of this project. I also wanted to touch on the hospital patients at Lone Fir. When we reinitiated this project, some thought that patients from the Oregon Hospital for the Insane were also buried at Block 14. Block 14 is highlighted in blue on this slide. With recent research, however, we learned that patients were buried by the hospital at Lone Fir when they were not claimed by family members. We now know that 185 patients were buried at Lone Fir, and they were buried actually at Block 10, which was considered the asylum burial ground. So that area is shaded in pink on this slide. Researchers now believe it is highly unlikely that any patients are buried at Block 14. Next slide. So we recognize the importance of recognizing and honoring the patients and their history as well. Mental illness is something that impacts every one of us, whether directly or indirectly. To recognize the patients, we're fabricating and installing headstones for those who do not already have grave markers. We're also working to create a space at the new memorial that is welcoming and healing for all. This includes taking a therapeutic design approach to the proposed memorial design. The team is also planning to provide interpretive information about the patients at Lone Fir. We've also publicly shared extensive research on patient burials on the Metro webpage. Next slide. Research conducted over the past 2 years is also informing where and how memorial improvements can physically happen on the site. During engagements with community, we heard about the importance of honoring ancestors. For many Chinese community members, this means not walking over the burial ground. Based on the history of the site, areas 1 and 2, highlighted in yellow on this slide, may follow more conventional construction techniques, including subsurface work. The balance of the project site, labeled number 3 and outlined in red, this area represents the space where burials occurred. Here, we're taking a gentle approach that includes minimizing built features in this area and building up from a layer of imported material rather than digging into the existing ground. Next slide. Over the past 18 months, the project team has held 2 public open houses and 2 online surveys to engage the general public. We've created 2 videos to explain the project, including one that explains the complex history of the site and a second that explained 2 different design options that the design team put forward. Also, we held 5 focus group sessions with Chinese communities, and as Helen mentioned, we've shared the project at several presentations at local conferences. During these engagements, we heard about the importance of honoring marginalized people buried at Lone Fir. For many Chinese community members, this means being able to conduct traditional rituals. We also heard about the importance of authentically telling the history of the site, including harms done, so that we might learn from mistakes made. Next slide. Last fall, we shared 2 design options for the memorial with community. One concept centered around a memorial wall engraved with the names of people once buried at the site. The other was largely comprised of a grove of ginkgo trees, a species with deep meaning in Chinese culture. The 2 concepts were referred to as the hill and the grove. Next slide. While both designs were well received overall, over 84% of people surveyed felt a connection to the grove concept. This input affected the preferred alternative design. And to share that design, I will now turn it over to Mike Yun. Next slide.
Hi, counselors. Good morning. I'm Michael Yun. Good to see you again. I think I saw you in Washington County for Nature and Neighborhoods. Good to be back here. I am a landscape architect and a principal at Knot Studio, and grateful to be involved in this project and leading the design team. So I'm going to share a few words about our design, but also about the thought process, internal and external, that went into the design work, because I think that's super important. Karen shared the hill and the grove, and over the course of, I guess, the last 6 to 8 months, we've been working on refining those into a refined concept. So there's 3 main things that we were considering during that time. One is community feedback, so making sure we listen to what everybody had been telling us. We started the process by talking to community for over a year before we even put pen to paper to start doing any design work. So community has been deeply involved. We listened to the Metro team feedback, so Parks and Nature, planning team, and also operations. And then lastly, our team really believes that we are tasked here with the serious job of repair. And so we wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing, we were working to repair this past harm. I want to add a few more words on exactly what that harm was here. I would characterize this history as the desecration of hundreds of graves in the Chinese burial ground and the forced repatriation of those remains during a time period where it was almost impossible for the Chinese community to do so. As Marcus mentioned, this occurred in the late 40s, early 50s. This was the peak of the Communist Revolution. There was virtually no way that these remains were going to make it back to their families. And that was the whole point of repatriation, was so that the remains could be with family to care for them. So for the Chinese community, honoring ancestors or ancestor veneration is a heart of the cultural practice. This transcends religions. This is part of Buddhist religion, Taoist religion, Confucianism. It's a bigger cultural thing than all of those. So having the desecration of this site for the community was very impactful. In addition to that, the erasure of those individuals who are buried there has led to an ambiguous loss for the community. So there is around 2,800 total individuals buried at the site, 1 acre. That's a lot of folks. We know of maybe 1 person in community who can trace back an ancestor to that site. People don't know who was buried there, and therefore they've been robbed of that ability to go and honor those ancestors. As Helen mentioned, the Qingming Festival, it's pretty much the largest, one of the largest cultural events of the year for Chinese communities, and that literally translates to tomb sweeping, where you bring offerings and you offer words to your ancestors. So being robbed of that for all of those years is something that we really take seriously as a need to repair. So in our design, we tried to focus on reinstituting elements that would both acknowledge those who are buried there, so to bring recognition to those names, specific recognition, and then also bring elements that will allow community to practice that tradition again, because that's really what people are thirsting for, are desiring out of this project is to, I mean, as Helen showed, people are going there now, even though it's just a grassy field. People are going there during the Qingming Festival in order to bring offerings. So we want to make sure we accommodate that. So what you're looking at here is some precedents for our design team, and I want to point out the reddish image on the second to the top right. And so this is a series of spirit tablets. So this is a traditional form of recognition for ancestors in Chinese culture. And this would normally have names, family lineage, place of birth, town, hometown, etc., engraved on there. And this can be represented both in homes, but also in public places. So what you're seeing here are spirit tablets for a community that's at a temple in China. So this is one of the design themes that we brought into our project as a way to recognize these individuals in a culturally sensitive manner that wasn't what I would characterize as like more Western, which would be like Vietnam Memorial or something, just putting names on the wall. We wanted to bring that form into this design. So if we advance the slide, you'll see the site plan. So as Karen pointed out, there are a lot of constraints on this site. For one, we want to really respect the history here. This is a burial ground. We know there are existing remains there. But at the same time, it's endured all of this trauma. I also want to pause and have us sit with, or just imagine for a second, the thought process that had to occur for the county to decide to do something like this, right? How many cemeteries do you see where there's one section that was a specific racial group that's just carved out? Why did they do that, right? It's not necessarily the easiest thing for them to do. Part of the reason why they did that, I mean, well, one, it's racist, right? Two, Chinese were experiencing Chinese exclusion, and they're also experiencing all types of other forms of restrictions, like alien land laws. They could not own land, and they also couldn't enter into contractual agreements. And so they didn't have a formal deeded right to this property, and that's something that in the public record is very clear. The county knew that, and they could take advantage of that. So anyway, back to the design. We've focused most of the built elements on the west side of the site, which wasn't historically part of the burial ground, and that's where you'll see a memorial pavilion that is created out of those spirit tablets that I show you, and then a square set of interpretive panels that surrounds that and protects that space. As you know, we're on the corner of 20th and Morrison. This is a high traffic area. We want to create at least a little bit of protection from that traffic while also making sure that we're optimizing things that are important to community and to Metro, which specifically is transparency, and so for people to be able to see through the site and to also have some openness. So if we forward to, well, actually, sorry, let's leave it in here for 1 second. I want to point out that we've retained the grove over the burial ground, and what we heard really strongly from community is that this represented a sense of hope, so planting it with culturally significant trees was important. People also were interested in having a white flowering plant at the time of the Qingming Festival, which is in April. So we've intermixed the ginkgo grove with Ulan magnolia, which is another culturally significant plant for Chinese that have really beautiful white flower in April. And then on the far east side is the site of the historic altar. And so there is some ongoing work on that, but basically what we are going to be doing in that space is just recognizing the history and marking that history on the landscape. It's that photo that you saw previously of a full roasted pig being brought to the altar. And so we don't want to recreate that, but we want to recognize it and demark it. And then the number 7 here, tucked into the grove, is another element important to Chinese culture, which is a traditional shrine honoring the god of the land, or the Tudogong. And so this is something that comes as part of the practice for Chinese burial and recognition, is that you honor the god of the land, and then you honor your ancestor in sequence. And I want to point out that burning incense in these locations is really, really important to community. It's the vehicle by which the offerings are transmitted to the spirit realm. And so if you go to Chinese temples, there's huge incense, holders everywhere. So we have been trying to work out a way to make sure that people can practice that here in the space. So if we advance the slide, you'll see a view looking into the entrance of the Spirit Tablet Pavilion. We heard strongly from community, we want this to feel Chinese, we want there to be more Chinese elements. And so we've incorporated a more traditional gate structure with the Duoliang, which is basically a two-part poem based on the name of the site. And so the naming is something that we're still talking through with community, but we want to make sure that we're having kind of that more recognizable traditional element as you walk in. And this is also intended to feel like a process of discovery. And so there's screening elements mixed with some solid elements here where you can see through, you can see into the Spirit Pavilion, but you get all of these nested views. So this whole process has been an uncovering process, and so we wanted the design to feel like that. So if we advance the slide, then you'll see the view from inside the Memorial Pavilion. And so there are a little under 3,000 tablets in this pavilion. One of the big desires, again, as I mentioned, from both Metro and community was to create transparency. This is also very challenging because we have a lot of names here. We have a lot of recognition, which take up space. And so we have come up with a method of basically using the tablets to create a screening element so that you can see through it, but we still have an individual spirit tablet with, on each one of those metal pieces is engraved the traditional characters from the burial ledgers that Marcus and Helen and Neil presented. And so we're documenting that we're putting that back into public space. And in the center is an altar where people can bring offerings. And then above it is an oculus or a window. And in Chinese culture, this would be a way for spirits that have been suffering here to transcend. And so if we move to the next slide, this is looking back. So we are using native meadow plantings in the understory in gesture, recognizing Chinese community's role in the colonial project and the repair to indigenous communities. So at the site there was native savanna, Douglas fir savanna here. And so the plantings in the understory, I think, should harken back to that, but also will repair the soil, which was, again, a maintenance building and paved from edge to edge. I also want to point out Metro is very good at maintaining native landscapes. There's a lot of acreage in the Metro system, so we want to make sure that this is something that people are comfortable with maintaining. And then on the walls is the interpretive, so there's adequate space for the interpretive, and that's one of the things we're working on this next phase. And I think the last slide, okay, yeah, and then I'll just hand it back to Karen.
Yeah, I know we're running along on time. I'll just quickly share, we recently closed a public input survey sharing these designs, and over 75% of respondents said that they felt connected to this design, and this was in a survey where only about 30% of those identified as Asian American. And when we look at the results or responses from Asian American community members, 96% of people responded that they felt connected to the design. So we do feel overwhelming support for the current direction of the design. Once we more fully digest this input from community, the design team will initiate the design engineering phase. So that's going through 30, 60, 90%. And we are working towards then going out to construction and having that construction completed by the end of 2026. So thank you for your time and your support of this very important project, and happy to open it up for any questions you might have.
Great, thank you to the community members and staff. It's been such a meaningful process, and it's been an honor to work and learn beside you all. I do have a question, since we're here to, in many ways, celebrate AA and HPI Heritage Month. Can any of you speak to kind of like what those 2,800 people that were buried at the cemetery, what were their jobs, what kind of contributions were they making to kind of the growth and development of Portland at that time?
Yeah, be happy to. Yeah.
So we don't know actually what each one of them did, right, Councilor Huang? But I do remember I did put together a talk. It's called, the Untold Stories of the Chinese Chinese Americans in Oregon. And what we know when I was doing my study to prepare for that talk is that actually the Chinese, the 11%, right, that Neil mentioned earlier, they helped to build our city, our state, our country. They did a lot of the work that people didn't want to do. I just want to give you one example. I don't know if that individual would have been buried at Lone Fir, but I know that when I went to the town Echo, I don't know if you guys know where it is, but it's near Pendleton. It's like 20 minutes away. And there I talked with one of the city managers. She's also the librarian. She's also, I think, the mayor of the city. But she was showing me a picture so the person who founded Echo, he named the town after his daughter. That's why the town's named Echo. But this founder of the town Echo, he actually had a chef that was a Chinese. And he had a picture of this chef, and that is in the archive in the, the city manager's office. And so I'm just thinking, one of the things that they did was they were chefs. And we also know that there's a Chinese garden at where the Met, Metropolitan, the Monoma Athletic Club, I'm sorry, the MAC, not the Met, the MAC is where that is located. That's where the Chinese had garden. Yes. And you know how we talk about farm to table? What they literally did, they took vegetables and they carried it with a stick on their shoulders, and they went door to door to peddle the vegetables. So that's, we also know they farmed, right? And we also know that in Astoria, a lot of the cannery work, where the Chinese were involved in that. And also, I don't know if you guys have been to Astoria, the Garden of Surging Waves. It was a gift that the city council in Astoria gave to itself for the 200th anniversary celebration. And the Garden Surging Waves is actually designed by one of our friends, Swen Ho. If you haven't had a chance to visit it, I highly encourage you to do so, because there you're going to learn a lot more about the Chinese American history. There's actually a historical timeline that's carved into the pavement there. And what we learned from the city councilor who was there during the unveiling of that garden, we got to know him a little bit, and he was telling us about what he knows. And we had, he cooked razor clams for us, actually. He went out and got razor clams that morning, and he owns an Italian restaurant there. He made us razor clams, and he sat down and he says, I was telling him about how I'm so interested in about really unearthing and learning more about Chinese American history in Oregon. And he says, I'm gonna show you something that you're gonna really be intrigued about, Helen. So he drove us to the mouth of the Columbia. And I don't know if you all know this, but at one point, if you leave to go out into the ocean, the Pacific, and because the Columbia flows in the Pacific, if you don't come back by a certain time of the day, you don't get to come back. Basically, you're gonna just die at sea. And so what they did was they built these. All of a sudden, the title of that
Jetty.
The jetty, yeah. Right? They build these jetties to help to make it safer for sea voyage, right? And he says, Helen, this jetty was built by Chinese, and many of them actually lost their lives building the jetty. I mean, it was just like such a touching moment for me to just know when you asked, Councilor, what did the Chinese do? Many of them actually gave their lives for this country. We know about the railroad construction, And even though, the folks may not have worked on a transcontinental railroad, but I know when I went to ECHO, they had a building, it's called the China House. Because at that time, when they were building railroads across Oregon, men had to have a place to sleep, right? So they would have places they call the White House. Those are for the white folks. And then they have places called the China House. That's where the Chinese have to, cook and do whatever they need to do under shelter. And so we know the Chinese also worked on the railroads here in Oregon. So those are just some examples of what but I also want to mention, along my research, we also found that they own businesses, right? And so it ranges from doing work that nobody want to do all the way up to owning businesses.
Thank you
If
for
you
sharing
don't
that
mind,
history.
I'd like to add one quick
course.
thing. If you've ever eaten a Bing cherry, know that the Bing cherry was invented by a Chinese immigrant, Bing. And so just another contribution of the Chinese community to the United States.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, any comments, thoughts? I'll go with Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy President Wong. Thank you for your presentation. I really want to uplift the community value in all of this. And also, I want to speak to what you spoke to earlier, and that is calling it out the way it is. A lot of bad things happened during that time period with the leadership, in charge of government and all kinds of things. The design, though, is beautiful. I really appreciate the elements and the thoughtfulness, especially around how we can see our ancestors, because that's something I personally believe too, is we have to honor our ancestors, because if you can't respect the dead, then you don't respect the living. And so, this is a project long overdue, but I'm super supportive of it, and I'm glad that we are at this point as an agency, but also in the face of the world, we can say we're doing something and we're doing the right thing for a community. So my hat's off to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilor Nolan.
Mr. Chair, first of all, to you for pushing forward to make sure that this happened, and it happened now and not 10 years from now, because Metro's been dancing up to the edge of this for too long. Thank you. And to the history that you've shared, I must tell you, I am struggling to contain my emotions. The pain, and at the same time, the tenderness that you've described of the community, and the vigilance of the community, and the elegance of the design that brings all of that out is overwhelming. And I am so glad to be part of it. I am looking forward to celebrating with you when this opens. And it is the beginning, Helen. It's not the end, it's the beginning of something magical. Thank you.
Councilor Lewis.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Deputy Council President, for the opportunity to comment. My thoughts are that this is an absolutely remarkable moment, because our council is here with community and with staff that have been working really hard through a lot, not only a lot of history of people and of communities, but also history of institutions, which so often get shoved under the rug. And across this region, there are other institutions that have parallel and shared history that are not doing this work. And I hope that from the Metro perspective, we can help model and lend resource so that those institutions can rise. It's not only a story of Multnomah County and of Metro, it's also a story of the city of Milwaukee, the city of Oregon City, of Clackamas County, places I represent, not to mention other parts of this region. So this is a regional story. I hope this is a place of not only local community healing, but also for across the region. So really nice work to get us to this point. I look forward to continuing to be able to lift up the work of the community and the staff who are holding all of this so carefully. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you again for all your work. It's been an honor to work beside you, and we're looking forward to the groundbreaking. Thank you.
Thank you, counselors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as we transition to the next item, I'd also like to express our appreciations to Anne, Victor, and Beth, who got the treats that were downstairs this morning. The baked goods were from Maison. The coffee was from Cafe, and snacks from across Asia from Fubon. So thank you for setting that up. Excuse me.
Oh, did Duncan? You go use the restroom.
Okay, go.
Okay, well, we'll move on to our next item, which is the 2024 Urban Growth Management discussion on the Sherwood West expansion proposal.
Hello.
Hello.
Coming into the room.
Okay.
Good morning. Yay.
Okay, so today we are continuing our conversations about the 2024 Urban Growth Management Decision Cycle. In recent council meetings, we reviewed the preliminary demographic and economic regional forecast and the capacity analysis, both of which will inform the 2024 Urban Growth Report that will be released this summer. Metro has received one proposal for expansion this year, and the City of Sherwood staff are here today to present on that proposal. Beginning the presentation today, our Metro staff will also introduce our guests from Sherwood. Today we have Erin Key, Urban Policy and Development Manager, and Ted Reed, Principal Regional Planner.
Hello,
Hello.
I'm Erin Key, Urban Policy and Development Manager. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you, Council, for that wonderful welcome. Ted Reed is available for questions, but is not going to be at the table today. But I would like to introduce our guests from Sherwood. They're here as it was announced. They're here to share the proposal that they've presented for the Sherwood West concept plan and help council understand that concept plan. Eric Rutledge is Community Development Director with the City of Sherwood, and Bruce Coleman, on his left, is Economic Development Manager. I'm going to turn it over to Eric to share information about what they have planned.
Yeah, thank you, Erin. And hello to Metro Council and guests. Eric Rutledge, Community Development Director with the City of Sherwood. As mentioned, to my left is Bruce Coleman, Economic Development Manager with the city. The Mayor of Sherwood, Tim Rosner, was also scheduled to be here. He had a last-minute conflict, so he's not going to be here today. Apologies for that. So with that, I'll get right into it. We can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, first, actually, I just want to pause and say thank you to Metro staff and really all of the committees and groups that have been put together to review this proposal. We've presented to MTAC a few times. We presented to IMPAC, the roundtable, a lot of thoughtful, insightful feedback from them, and Metro staff's been very supportive. Just want to thank everyone for their time, energy, effort to the state. So on this slide here, you have overview of the city of Sherwood and our growth areas. The city boundary you can see in the pinkish purple color. And Sherwood West is off to the left or to the west of the current city boundary. It's about 1,300 acres total. you can see an area to the midpoint of Sherwood West where it comes out in a little square. That's the Sherwood High School that Metro approved a UGB expansion for in 2018. That request came from the Sherwood School District. Within Sherwood West, there's 126 properties with an average size of about 10 acres. So, still rural land uses in the county designated zoning for the hold pattern before it comes into the city boundary and the urban growth boundary. To the south is in yellow is the Brookman addition that was also brought into the urban growth boundary, was in the mid 2000s or so, and you can see the annexations that are happening there. Some of the purple line coming down into that yellow area. And then on the right, we have the Tonkin Employment Area, which is another growth area for us. Again, you can see the annexations happening there. Brookman Addition to the south is mainly our residential growth area, and I'll have a few photos of what's going on there. And then the Tonkin Employment Area in purple is our employment growth area. We've seen a lot of growth in that area in the last 5 years or so, and I'll have a slide on that as well. And go to the next slide, please. So first, just talking about Sherwood specifically, these are two photos from what's going on in our city limits. On the left is the Old Town Historic District that we have in our town center. Townhomes that are going up there, higher density mixed use in this area. And then on the right is the Brookman addition that I mentioned to the south. That's a single family detached that is currently going in. And while we are getting some development in the historic downtown at a higher density, a lot of our growth in the last few years has been in single-family detached in the lower density zones. And so what we'll get to is Sherwood is looking really to right-size the type and the size of housing that we're getting. The market right now really lends itself more towards larger single-family detached. That's what the builders are building, and those are selling. But we also need to provide a greater variety of housing, and I'll touch on that in just a second. In terms of actual numbers, we have a need for 1,100 units over our 20-year planning period for housing needs analysis. Approximately 500 of those we can fit within the current urban growth boundary, 600 units not in the current urban growth boundary, and anticipated those would be met in Sherwood West. Next slide, please. Thank you. And then in terms of our own employment land needs, this is a photo of Sherwood Commerce Center, received occupancy about 2 weeks ago, and a project done by Schnitzer Properties. In our Tonkin employment area, the employment growth area that I mentioned. And as you can see, these areas can serve as a large single site, or it can be demised into smaller sites of about 6,000 square feet or so, really meeting a wide variety of employment land uses in the industrial sector. And the logos that you see there on the right are companies that Bruce has done a really great job attracting over the past 5 years or so, and that we're really excited about in our targeted industries of advanced manufacturing, clean technology, et cetera. And in terms of numbers for employment need, we have a need for 420 acres approximately of industrial land over our 20-year planning period. About 240 of that is an identified need outside of the current urban growth boundary. So we are looking beyond our current urban growth boundary to meet our anticipated residential and employment land needs. Next slide, please. And, one of the things that the city is looking at is also the regional need for industrial and employment land and how we might fit into that should there actually be a demonstrated need for industrial land. And this is just to reflect a little bit on where we've been and where the 2024 report might land. Of course, it hasn't come out yet. But in the 2018 Regional Industrial Site Inventory, the analysis showed that there was 8,600 acres of buildable industrial employment land inside the UGB, but also found that there was no Tier 1 available in unencumbered sites within the region. Available in Tier 1 means development ready within 6 months. So available unencumbered, meaning no environmental or other land issues, and available within 6 months. That really gets to how competitive are we as a region, and what sites do we have available when potential prospective company developer comes looking for a specific site. Can we meet the need at that time? And the report also talks about the challenge of moving Tier 2 and Tier 3, which is 6 months and greater, into Tier 1 status. And this image here shows just that this is a site in Sherwood, and the amount of rock and earthwork that has to happen to move a site from Tier 2 into Tier 1, and especially the large sites. So this particular earth mover, if you will, has been on the site for a number of years, prepping the site for development, and eventually it will get there, but it takes a while, even within the current urban growth boundary, and is quite expensive. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about what we've done for engagement. We had a Citizens Advisory Committee and a Technical Advisory Committee contributing to the Sherwood West Concept Plan. The CAC had over 15 members, very broad representation throughout the community. The Technical Advisory Committee had over 20 members of staff from partner cities, partner agencies, et cetera. Each of those committees held over 14 meetings each, so over 28 public meetings done in development of this plan. Just a lot of input. We also reached out to the general public through 3 community open houses, pop-up events, virtual open houses, et cetera. And in my opinion, led to the unanimous approval of the concept plan by the Planning Commission and the City Council. Next slide, please. And the community input, including from, in particular, the Citizens Advisory Committee, led to the Sherwood West vision, which is that Sherwood West is a walkable community, has a balance of employment, residential, commercial, and green space land uses, provides stable, high-paying jobs, offers a variety of well-designed housing choices, feels like a natural extension of Sherwood's existing neighborhoods, and is integrated not only with our current city limits, but also regional destinations to the north, River Terrace, which is developing now, Tualatin National Wildlife Refuge, which is adjacent to us. And then finally, Sherwood West is really focused in protecting the Chicken Creek Greenway, which is the main creek that runs through Chicken Creek, and providing access to open space. Next slide, please. And so this is the recommended and accepted concept plan that we are proposing. And I'll just start in the north at the top and kind of work its way down. So if you recall, this is on the west side of current city limits. You can see, I'll actually start kind of in the middle. You can see the high school there outlined in white. So nothing shown there because that's already in the UGB and within the city limits. But starting towards the north, we have a proposed mixed employment zone, about 258 gross acres shown there in purple. Again, we're targeting the key industries that we've attracted over the last few years: advanced manufacturing, clean tech, and others for that mixed employment zone.
Eric, question, can we full screen that slide? It's real, the slide we were looking at with the concept plan. Can we full screen it so we can actually read it, or is that not possible?
I wonder if it's in the pack.
The map,
The map with the legend.
that one,
Yeah.
can you fill the screen with that, or is that as big as it gets?
It's a screenshot, so it doesn't go bigger than that.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to follow what you're saying, and those letters are too small for these glasses.
Yeah, and I apologize for that. I can walk you through, if you can see the colors, I can walk you
Yep.
through it. So
That would be helpful.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you don't
Eric.
have to, and I can't read it. It could be illegible. So starting in the north, the purple color is the mixed employment zone, about 250 acres. And as you move south, the orange and lighter yellow colors are going to be, there I am in full screen.
Well, that's full screen.
That is full screen.
Thanks for trying.
No, I think it's better now. You can kind of see it.
Okay. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. It does look better. Orange, so the darker yellow orange is going to be higher density, and the lighter color is going to be lower density. So you see just south of that mixed employment zone, a high density multifamily area with some housing mixed in. And then, of course, green is going to be park space. So the sort of brighter green colors there are going to be two destination-oriented park spaces. In the north, ball fields, other family-oriented spaces, and then towards the south, on the south side of Chicken Creek, that circular park space is going to be our more natural area, really embedded within the Chicken Creek Greenway, and so more of a natural open space trail oriented park. And then as you move south, we'll have additional residential around the high school. We are planning, you can see some red in there, red and orange around the high school, so that would be higher density mixed use around the high school. And we're planning a pedestrian bridge that's going to connect our two city limits, which I'll get to. And then in the very south, we have what we're calling a hospitality or gateway district. And this is area that we envision as the gateway to wine country, really leaning in towards our location on within the Willamette Valley and within the Willamette Valley wine country, and really bridging the divide between the rural and urban land uses. Next slide.
Hold on one second before you move.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, come on. Let's go to that. Can you tell us more about like what the density thresholds are on medium and low?
Next slide, please. So there's the density calculation. So on the low end, the lowest density would be 3.5 to 5, and then on the high end, 16.8 to 24.
Are those of the total land, or is that net of infrastructure?
So that's the density net. So after you take out the infrastructure, what is the density? And that's what's shown there.
So you take out roads, you take out parks, you take out schools?
Usually not schools. Usually net density is after taking out roadways, right-of-ways, and environmental restrictions.
So all of Chicken Creek is taken out? Is that an environmental restriction?
I think you'd have to look at it slightly differently. So what you're getting to is, I believe, is what the net development acreage is within the entire concept plan area, and that would be about 600. Yeah. And then within a specific...
Out of 1,200?
Correct. Correct.
So half the land you're proposing to bring into the UGB is only indirectly used to support housing or jobs?
So the net development of the entire planning area, about 1,200, yes. Once we account for roads, parks, natural areas, the development, the net development potential there is about half. Yes, I think it's correct.
Thanks.
I'll take this opportunity to just point out that if you want to see the map up nice and close, it's on page 42 of the meeting packet.
Thanks, Erin.
Any other questions on this slide?
I think you can probably.
When they go back to the chart, you can see the net acre. And it's,
So this is a slide that shows the different land detail of the different housing types and land uses that we're proposing. In terms of the types of housing and the zones going from residential low all the way through multifamily, and a few things I wanted to point out here. The state passed HB 2001 in, I believe it was 2019, and that allowed developers the ability to construct middle housing in all residential zones. That also allowed single family. What we've seen in Sherwood so far is the market has still pretty strongly lean towards single-family detached, despite that ability in the state law to develop middle housing. And so what we are hoping to do in Sherwood West, as I mentioned, is sort of right-size the amount of middle housing that we're getting. And so we are proposing a few zones or areas that will be exclusive for middle housing and cottage cluster development. So we can get to the actual numbers there, but these are envisioned as, exclusive zones for these housing types to ensure that we get a minimum amount of middle and cottage cluster housing in addition to anything that the market would support in those other zones. You can go to the next slide, please. And so we saw this slide already, but the overall range of housing ranges from approximately 3,100 units up to 5,500 units, and that is going to depend on how much middle housing we get in those residential zones outside of the middle housing and cottage cluster zones. Next slide, please. And this is a close end of our mixed employment zone, about 250 acres gross. This was identified as an employment area because of the flat terrain, large parcels, good access to transportation. All along Roy Rogers Road, just going to be 5 lanes between this area and I-5. Again, targeting mixed employment, office, light industrial, flex space in our target industries. Next slide, please. And our hospitality zone, 75 gross acres. Again, we envision this as the gateway to wine country, really bridging that divide between urban and rural, working closely with wineries and other small agricultural businesses. The vision here, lodging, tasting rooms, restaurants, event space, small retail shops along Highway 99. Next slide, please. And in terms of employment estimates, most of the jobs would come in that mixed employment zone in the north, about 2,400 jobs, and then the total 4,500 jobs within the planning area. Next slide, please. This is a pedestrian bridge that is currently under construction, so it's going to bridge the YMCA to the new Sherwood High School that was constructed, really trying to get a safe crossing of the highway. Highway 99 runs through our community, really bisects it in a unproductive way for active transportation users. And so we want to, just provide a safe crossing for the current users, but really look into the future to bridge the gap between current city limits and Sherwood West. And on the south side there is the image of our current arterial road through our Woodhaven neighborhood, that's Sunset Boulevard, and the vision would be that continues into Sherwood West as well. Next slide, please. And again, really leaning into the park and trail network, and you can see how much of a resource Chicken Creek Greenway is, and I think this speaks to some of your question, Councilor Nolan, of why there's so much acreage taken out of the development capacity. There are a lot of natural resources in this area that we do want to protect and not develop over. And so a lot of the Chicken Creek Greenway, which is a significant natural resource, will be protected as part of the concept plan vision. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. On that chart, I can see the greenway, it's marked. What's that light green space that goes up into what you're proposing for industrial land?
Yeah, that would be Metro Title 13 land, and so the plan right now is to evaluate the value, if you will, through it's called an ESEE analysis, and figure out the value of that habitat and the trade-offs of either developing versus protecting. Next slide, please. And then in terms of development readiness, which we have heard a lot about from the Metro staff, Washington County Clean Water Services have been a great partner to date, and actually we're very proactive in putting in this sewer trunk line in Roy Rogers Road as part of the development or redevelopment of the road, so we don't have to go back in, tear up the road, and put the sewer line back in. Next slide, please. And then we also have the Brookman trunk line, which is required to serve the high school, which is going in right now and would also serve the southern portion of Sherwood West. Next slide, please. And then finally, the pedestrian bridge, as I mentioned, you can see here the difficulty that a student has going from the YMCA to the high school. You have to cross Highway 99 and then another county arterial right now to get to the high school. And so as shown in this image, the bridge would provide a safe crossing for students, but also any future residents between current city limits and Sherwood West. Next slide, please. And then, as mentioned earlier, really robust engagement process through all of this, including with our partners. And so we do have letters of support from Washington County, Clean Water Services, TriMet, the Sherwood School District, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Also a letter of support from key stakeholders in the employment arena of Greater Portland, Inc., Port of Portland, Washington County Chamber, Westside Economic Alliance, and other Sherwood Chamber of Commerce as well. And I think that concludes the presentation, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eric and Bruce. Colleagues, any questions?
Yeah.
Mr.
Chair.
Yes, I'll start with Councilor Nolan.
Thanks. I've had the chance to see this several times now, and now I'm starting to understand it. But the more I see it, the more I am zeroing in on some questions. And some of them are wonky and some of them are broader. Do you know on your chart, on this chart, the purple and the commercial, the industrial and commercial, do you know how much of that land is currently zoned and taxed for agricultural or forestry uses?
How much of it is zoned and taxed for agricultural purposes?
Or forestry?
I don't know. Are you looking for an amount or like how much the
Acreage
tax?
or percent?
So the zoning here is going to be FD 20, future development 20. So it's really seen as a holding pattern prior to being brought into the urban growth boundary. So it's going to be a different zoning.
An urban reserve, I get that.
Correct, correct. But, there's no urban land uses. So I'd say at a very high level, in theory, it should all be, under that land use orientation, if you will. I mean, there's a lot of people that are living on these properties, sort of large estate type homes. And some of them do have, working farm or forest. And then I'd say there are some what I'd call, very true farmers where they've been farming that land for decades. So I think it's kind of a mix. We can certainly pull the tax rules and get you a clear answer on that if you like.
What I'm trying to get is an understanding of where urban uses, if this all or part of it goes forward, where we are paving over or developing over land that is currently used, zoned, or taxed for agroforestry purposes. And also because abutting uses can create friction, I'm interested in how much of it abuts working farms or land that's used and taxed or zoned and taxed as farmer forestry. And I understand, I didn't expect you. I've seen you several times though, and you have a lot of details in your head, so you might have known that number. It wasn't a total long shot for me to ask that here. You showed a chart, and I don't know if I focused on the residential density. Did you have commercial and industrial density on that chart too? How many jobs per acre are you projecting?
I'm not sure if we show it by acre. Usually not shown by acre, but I believe we could probably do that calculation. We would have the number of jobs per zone, which we could convert to density if you're interested in that. So I don't know if we can go back to the presentation. We could pull up that slide, please.
I am interested in that because in my mind, if we expand the urban growth boundary, I want for the region to get the most value out of each acre that is added in. Whether it's a residential use, the most density, or whether it's a jobs land, the most density that we can. Because we're not gonna go back and redo it 20 years from now if we have more demand for housing land or jobs land. Along that lines, some cities in the region have minimum density requirements for their zoning. Does Sherwood have those?
Yes, each of our zones has a minimum density requirement, yes.
Can we get you don't have to rattle it off, I suspect it's complex. If you could send that along.
Sure.
That would be helpful to know. My understanding of our housing needs is region-wide, is that they are more urgent, more pronounced, and frankly, more difficult to meet at lower income levels. I'm interested in knowing what Sherwood already has in place or what it plans to augment your current practices and ordinances and codes and all to ensure that you're helping meet the region-wide need for rental housing at 80% and below of median income and owner-owned housing at 130% median income and below. Again, you're brilliant. I've seen that in the designs here, but it's a lot of data to have in your head. If you could follow up with it, that would be great.
Of course.
And the final question you may have an answer for today, and that is, I looked at your list of engagement process. I didn't notice, and maybe it's because I don't know, I'm not familiar with all those groups, what BIPOC-led community groups were involved in the engagement process?
Yeah, we can follow up on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I may have more, but.
Colleagues, any other questions for the team?
No, I think Councilor Nolan hit him.
All right. Back to you, Councilor Nolan.
I do have one more, and it's more of a philosophy question. When you talked about industrial land, you talked about Tier 1 and Tier 2, and you seemed, in what I was hearing, to focus on Tier 1, which you said is defined as land that's ready to develop in 6 months. So help me square in my brain, if we're looking at a 20-year horizon, why is a 6-month readiness relevant?
Do you want me to try on that one?
Please.
I mean, the reality is that what I've discovered in terms of working as an economic development practitioner is that there is a lack of larger sites that are ready now. And I can give you one example. Just the other day, I saw from the state of Oregon a recruitment for a semiconductor fab facility, looking for, I think it was, I'm trying to remember now, 125 acres for 600 jobs. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist now in Sherwood. I think it's really hard to come by in some other cities, but I can't speak for those cities. And so I had to tell Business Oregon that we could not accommodate that, and we could not provide such a site for a company that could well be looking outside of Oregon. We don't ever know the details of a company that's looking, but we try very hard when we see these recruitment inquiries from Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency, to try to see if we have a site and proactively respond to it. In this particular case, and this is not the first one I've experienced, in Sherwood we have simply had to tell Business Oregon we don't have that kind of a site. And in many cases I've had to tell Business Oregon that we do not have other sites that maybe are smaller, but 50-acre sites or 75-acre sites. So I think that's the reason why Tier 1 is really important, because we are in a period now where there's a tremendous opportunity for the growth of the semiconductor industry here versus in some other competing states, from New York State to Arizona to just other states that are very, very aggressive on that, which is a key industry in this area. I don't know if that helps.
Thanks.
Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thank you so much. Want to be extremely appreciative of the time that you've spent not only on the work in community, but of also communicating this out regionally, hosting bus tours and so on, so that we could actually get our feet on the ground, see the sites. I'm particularly enthused by the aspirations around Gateway to Wine Country and the hospitality sector there. I think that the critical piece of economic development that can be provided through government collaboration in that sector is in providing that sort of space. Obviously, Metro already plays a role in tourism. And I hope that we're in coordination there, particularly if you do decide to move forward, thinking through the sports that I've heard mentioned in addition to the wine country. My question is on coming to us with all of these plans together. Obviously, economic development and housing have very different needs and very different levels of urgency. Can you speak to your implementation plan and if there are phases that are projected out that are not represented on paper?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilor Lewis. Yeah, absolutely. This area is large enough that it needs to be phased, and so there are a few key nodes, if you will, that are likely to develop first, just based off the infrastructure. And so I showed a few images of the sewer lines, and basically that more or less is in large part what it's going to come down to. So the Brookman sewer line is going to come up to serve the high school, and it will connect into the high school, the new Sherwood High School, which is in the urban growth boundary. I fully suspect that area will then develop first, just because of the availability of that infrastructure. On the north side, similarly, that trunk line called the Chicken Creek trunk line is going to come up to serve the mixed employment zone, and I think that's also going to be a node, if you will, a catalyst for other types of development. So we are looking at phasing this in terms of, so that's just the physical infrastructure and the very natural restrictions on future development. In terms of the planning process, we will be doing a master planning process for this area if it's brought into the urban growth boundary. And so we will look at, exactly what should develop, what is practical and pragmatic to develop first, based on some of those realities that I mentioned, and get a plan going for phase development. I think we don't want what we call leapfrogging. It's not what we're looking for and what our code currently prevents. And the last thing I'll mention is we're going to update our annexation code. And so prior to coming into the city, a developer will be required to get a development agreement with us to ensure that there's sufficient infrastructure, natural resources that are identified are protected, park spaces provided, trails, et cetera. So we're not just going one development to the next and hoping it works out. We are looking at master planning and then implementing those master plans through annexation agreements. And I suspect that the areas that we are identifying as going first will very likely go first, unless the developer is willing to put in some significant infrastructure that would then allow or open up a different area for development. Usually it's going to be restricted based on the infrastructure.
If I can follow up on some of Councilor Lewis's line of questioning, are you able to speak a bit more about kind of some of the overall economic impacts in kind of the industrial and commercial expansion areas? I know you listed kind of jobs anticipated, but I'm wondering if you have like does like Travel Oregon have, additional, room night hotel stays, that's kind of projected, or, an industrial expansion? Like, what's the scale of economic impact? Because, jobs is one thing, which is really important, but sometimes, some jobs are making microchips, and that's, higher economic value. So do you have a sense of scale of those kind of impacts?
Yeah, let me try on this. The city council's made it very clear. They annually go through their goal-setting session, usually spend a day on a Saturday going through that annually. And one of the top priorities is certainly economic development. And when they look at economic development, they're looking at what is called the traded sector, and a very specific list of target types of industries that we're looking for. They include semiconductor and electronics, which makes it, we've already proven, makes a lot of sense in Sherwood. Clean tech, and there's a lot of battery storage and battery energy companies in the immediate Sherwood, Tualatin, Wilsonville, I call it the South Metro area. It's companies that are in aerospace, there are companies in robotics that are now growing in Sherwood. There's companies that are just a whole range of advanced manufacturing. And these, we've been working with Greater Portland Inc. On trying to identify the types of industries that are going to be higher paying industries, because the council's goal is to really do whatever we can to facilitate and encourage, not just facilitate, but encourage the growth of higher paying family wage jobs. It's in Sherwood, but obviously it's to serve a much larger metro area. We actually find that our employment base is from Salem to Portland, in essence, and that's where the employees are coming from in a lot of our manufacturing companies that have recently come into Sherwood, mainly because of our location near the I-5 corridor. And so we are very focused on those kinds of jobs. We can't always guarantee that, but we are really working, we're also starting to look at incentive programs that might be used to encourage that to happen specifically, rather than just telling the developer, we'd like you to do this. Well, maybe we can incentivize some of that, and that's some of the early discussions we're having with the city council at this stage. Did I answer your question? Oh, you were talking about hospitality also. That was the other thing. So last summer, we completed a study with a group called HVS, which is a hotel consultancy firm. And we were asking them to look at the market in Sherwood for hotel development. Right now, we have one hotel. The HVS study, and it was a conservative study. They saw the market for hotel development initially as being related to the corporations and the large employers that are not only coming into Sherwood, but have been growing in the immediate area. But they also looked at the wine country as a potentially strong opportunity area for the growth of hotel development. And that's probably going to be more in the form of boutique hotels, maybe some destination hotels. And I would say that Sherwood West Hospitality District is going to be the ideal place for that to happen over time. Did that help?
Yeah, I was hoping for more like hotel room nights expected increase, or like, what's the growth in our regional GDP? And,
okay.
Specific numbers like that, just to help me understand the potential growth opportunities and scale. But if you don't have that today, that's
okay.
Yeah, and I think, understanding the regional impact is important. I mean, we're very focused in Sherwood, of course, and just a few comments from my side. In 2020, the largest employer in Sherwood was Walmart. In 2022, the largest employer was Lam Research, which is a huge deal for us, right? We went from a retail-oriented employer as the highest number employer to an advanced manufacturing company, and that has an impact on, it's an equity issue, frankly. Bringing jobs, low barrier, high-paying jobs to our community. There are, not just manufacturing jobs. Bruce and I were just talking with the operations manager of another advanced manufacturing company that we attracted to Sherwood, who's been in the community for 20 years and was commuting to Wilsonville, probably, commuting to another community to go to work. And now they expanded it into Sherwood. He now has a job in Sherwood. He now wants to be engaged and start doing and be on the planning commission. And so there are very real impact. We'll get you numbers on the regional, but speaking anecdotally and also in the data in terms of employment numbers, there are very real impacts for Sherwood in terms of these economic development efforts.
Great, thank you. Councilor Simpson.
Thank you, Deputy President Wong. Appreciate Bruce, always good to see you, first of all. And I appreciate the presentation. I do have a question on the dense housing, and it'll be a quick one, but maybe you have answers, maybe you don't. But what's the split on market, affordable, and deeply affordable? What are you planning on there? Because I get the idea of providing high-quality jobs, but in that big purple area up there, there's going to be some service work that is also going to be there too. And we also need to make sure we're supporting everybody who would like to live in that community. So what's that split look like?
Yeah, so right now, we're at the concept planning stage. And so we're really not at the point of, I guess, formally designating any type of affordable housing. It's not something that we heard as a absolute requirement from the Citizens Advisory Committee. But I think it's something that we can look at through the comprehensive planning. So the current approach, based on the concept plan, and again, we still have we have multiple years of planning left. So concept plan, very high level, comprehensive planning, zoning, and even further than that, development agreement. So there's probably, 2 to 6 years of planning left where I'd say this type of question really comes into play, where you actually have a developer, at the table, you actually have a property owner at the table. The city can actually, see themselves potentially being involved as a player. We're just not at that stage right now, and so I think the current approach is from the concept plan is market rate, all market rate, but accomplishing more affordability through supply and also making sure that we get to a final product in that housing that serves a wider variety of people, but also is offered at a lower price point. And again, what we're seeing in Sherwood is basically single-family detached at about 2,000 square feet or so. And that we know that is not serving the needs of the community. And if we do add more jobs, there's going to be a need for more housing, of course, but also housing at a variety of pricing points. So the cottage cluster that I mentioned, and also the middle housing, high-density apartments, all of those would be mixed in. And so the current approach is market rate. I think the other challenge, at least that I see right now as a jurisdiction, is that we're a relatively small jurisdiction, and it can be difficult for us to get into the arena of actually developing and I guess maintaining affordable housing. It's not something that we do currently, but I think we're open to exploring all sorts of options to get as much affordability in Sherwood West as we can.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to come back to what Councilor Nolan spoke about earlier. I mean, a lot of, folks who are people of color or communities of color need to be involved in that process. I don't know what it meant by, like, if you go back to your statement you wrote up there with high quality jobs, and like maintaining our community cohesion or whatever it said up there. Like, I would want to diversify that language.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think you answered my question, but I want to confirm one of my questions. Sherwood does not currently have any affordable housing community within its city limits?
Oh, we do. Yes. Not that is owned and maintained by the city of Sherwood was the statement I made.
Oh, okay. So you have roughly how many units of, to use the phrase we use around here, affordable and deeply affordable?
Yeah, we can get it. It's in the concept plan appendices or in our H&A, but I can get that for you. I don't have it off the top.
If you could just give me a page reference, that would be.
Of course, yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a big document and I'm working my way through it.
Oh, yeah, we'll appreciate that, yeah.
If I might follow up also, Mr. Chair. Do you know how many owners you have of the property that's proposed for your 1,200 acre expansion?
Sorry, can you?
How many different owners
Oh,
own that
100
land? You talked, for example, about employment land and the need for some customers, some potential developments that might consider Sherwood looking for 50 acres. Are there 50-acre parcels currently in one ownership? Or looked at another way, how many parcels are out there? And then I want to understand what Sherwood does actively. Does Sherwood help by being an interim owner to consolidate that land? Does it do, what else does it do, the city, or working with the county to consolidate that? Because I'm betting, well, maybe I shouldn't bet. I should wait till you tell me how many owners you've got or how many different lots. Do you have 50-acre lots owned by a single owner?
And are you thinking residential or employment or both?
I was focused on job land.
So and Bruce can chime in here at any time, in that North District mixed employment zone.
Right.
There are, oh goodness, off the top, I don't think we have a minimum 50-acre parcel outright. But there is, there's definitely multiple parcels under the same ownership that would constitute 50 acres. And Bruce should chime in here. I think we are interested in being a facilitator to create those large parcels. So we did a follow-up study that was funded by Metro, thank you for that, that looked at the ability to what we call assemble lots. And so the assembly, that study showed that we could assemble up to about a 95-acre property that would, a single property, correct, that would take properties under different ownership, all coming into the same hands. So it would be challenging. I think a much easier lift would to hit that 50-acre number. I think that's certainly feasible because we know that there's multiple properties under single ownership that could constitute that. Getting the neighbor on board who's under completely different ownership of multiple parcels could be more difficult.
Yeah, I think that's all correct. I mean, east of, if we looked at the map, east of Elwood, south of Shoal-Sherwood Road, that's an area where there are opportunities for larger parcels, but there is no single parcel that is 50 acres. But there is an opportunity in some cases maybe to get to a 50-acre site with regard, as Eric said, as regard to assembling some parcels, because they're individual parcels that have the same ownership. And we know that there's already interest in having that happen.
I'm sorry, Bruce.
I'm sorry.
What did you just say? I didn't quite get it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
The last sentence.
That's it. We already know there's some interest in that happening in terms of some of the property owners recognizing that the site is really ideal, what they've said to us, ideal for, we call it mixed employment, which could be flex tech, that kind of development. We do know that there's some other parcels in there where people would like to build housing instead. And I think where the city council is, as you can see from the plan, is that they want an area that is exclusively focused on employment in that northern district. And so it'd be really hard, I think, to commit to getting to that 95 acres through an assembly, because that in fact leaves some property owners with the ability to say, well, we want a lot more money in order to join in on a larger project. And so, but what we do, and we've done this throughout this Tonkin employment area, which is the eastern part that we toured, we have worked very extensively and very proactively to encourage property owners to try to work together. We've encouraged private property owners to assemble other parcels. It's all been voluntary, but we've taken a very active role in terms of doing that, and that's now created something in the range of 1.2 million square feet of new industrial park space in the last 5 years in Sherwood. And that's all because of encouraging encouraging this to happen, facilitating it, connecting people. This is really what we do a lot of at the city in terms of economic development and sure, and we would do that again, obviously, on a very proactive basis in the Northern District.
You talked about Clean Water Services being a good partner, and you had TriMet's logo up there as well. It requires other infrastructure to serve if you developed as your concept plan shows. What's the financeability of the roads and Clean Water provides? Does Clean Water Services have clean and dirty water? Okay.
They do, yeah.
So
Well,
roads-
sorry, not drinkable water, but they do stormwater management.
Okay.
Yeah.
So other infrastructure. What have you done to analyze the financeability of it and the impact on not just new development, but does it have any impact on existing residents and businesses, or do your SDCs cover that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think something we should all be thinking about as a region and, how we grow. And I know that's a consideration and concern for expansion areas. So we do have a preliminary funding strategy that talks about that analyzes estimates the cost of infrastructure, and really what that looks at is what I call regional infrastructure, meaning main arterial roads, main trunk lines, pump stations, things like that. And it does not include local roads. So if you're deep in a residential neighborhood, the smaller pipelines that go from the neighborhood out to the main road. So usually
Finance them with LIDs?
those are developer paid.
Okay.
So in order to get occupancy on a subdivision, developer has to put in the sewer, water, everything to serve the homes that they're building. Once you get outside of that area into the main lines and arterials, that is where it becomes more of what we call capital project done by the city in partnership with Clean Water Services, whoever it might be. So that study, the preliminary funding strategy, looks at those larger infrastructure pieces and develops a strategy for funding those. So we do have that. It's in the concept plan. We can reshare it. It did show a shortfall for a few of the categories, not a big shortfall. This is what I'd consider for the 1,300 acres, a relatively small shortfall. And we are proposing to make up for that through a number of different ways. Supplemental SDCs is certainly a way, and one of the most common ways to pay for it. Local improvement districts, maybe that requires a vote of the actual property owner, so that'd be up to the property owners if they wanted to do that. Urban renewal we're looking at as well. There are already SDCs being collected. I mean, like I mentioned on those maps, Clean Water Services is already putting in the trunk lines, which means in some areas the money is already identified and already there, and the infrastructure is actually going in. So we can reshare that study and then highlight the ways. Right now, our city council has indicated the preference is not to put it on current taxpayers, is that they would prefer it to be either through a development agreement if there's a shortfall, or through a supplemental SDC would be the two main ways right now.
Do you have, and I think I'm almost done. Do you have current or imminent requirements on energy efficiency or green energy? Do apartment buildings require EV charging stations? Do we require or incentivize photovoltaic? What are you planning to do to meet the regional climate smart goals?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a few things that we have in the works right now for current city limits, but they would also apply to potentially, depending on metro designations and others. For example, climate-friendly equitable communities, which is climate-friendly equitable communities, CFEC. That was an executive order by Governor Brown, which now cities are implementing. And so our town center designated by Metro or identified by Metro, very clear requirements for reducing greenhouse gases by reducing parking limits, et cetera, within that area. We're also updating our code right now as a result of CFEC. So 40% of new parking, you take the minimum, or actually you take the amount supplied by the developer, 40% of that has to include conduit for electric charging vehicles. Interestingly, they don't have to put in the actual charging station, but they provide the conduit, so you can plug it in the future.
Conduit's the hard part
Yeah,
to
yes.
redo if you've missed it in the initial.
Exactly. We do have in our code right now that the layout of streets, so when a developer is laying out a subdivision, they have to plan the streets to be oriented to maximize, natural light, and eventually, in my opinion, is to be able to take advantage of, if there does become a requirement for solar panels on residential roofs like California does, that's actually feasible. And also if they just want to do it voluntarily, that they're not stuck in a lot orientation, that precludes them from doing that. I'd say the other thing that we are really focused on, I think this plan does really well, is creates what I'm referring to, we refer to as a complete community. And so, the reality is that TriMet service right now, transit service, is very limited in Sherwood. It's just the reality. I think we all wish it was different, but that's the case. And so, how do we, that's part of the reason that we are focused on the employment land and bringing jobs into Sherwood. It's not just, bring higher paying jobs to Sherwood, but it's also reducing commute times for our residents, but also for the region as well. We have, the mayor always mentioned this, and I'll restate it, a population of 20,000, and we have less than 1,000 residents who live and work in Sherwood. And that's, to me, is a regional issue, because those workers aren't just, more of them are staying home now as part of remote work, but a lot of those workers are driving down to Alton Sherwood Road and getting on I-5 and coming downtown. A lot of them are also driving on Highway 99 straight to downtown. And so if we are able to provide the jobs closer to where people live, that should, in theory, reduce greenhouse gases and VMTs as well.
Thank you, Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I guess I'm sitting with a little bit of discomfort by the idea that we're looking at planning for the 20-some year future without a full appreciation for how planning for real affordability happens, whether for specific populations or broader workforce population. I don't think we have a complete community unless real affordability, deep affordability has been contemplated. And I really appreciate that you can't point to a specific parcel and you as a city are not owning or managing, but you've already engaged assertively with Clean Water Services. You've already engaged assertively with a number of other partner bureaucracies. I'd like to see some intentionality with the Washington County Housing Authority and the nonprofits that may serve the area as this process continues. I'd welcome them here with us at council. I'd welcome them on a staff level. That's something that, we recently saw River Terrace 2.0 come through a process here, and they almost were down to a parcel level. They were almost down to a timeline level. So that's just a place where I'm going to be looking for some growth, and I'm going to cheerlead speeding up that and not leaving it to chance. It's only going to happen if we plan. There's going to be limited funds, particularly because our Metro bonds are all allocated towards projects. We cannot go out to renew those bonds for another 3 years. But there are other sources of funding, and I would encourage us to all be real about that conversation. Thank you.
Amen.
Okay, seeing no other questions, I want to thank you all so much for your time and thoughtfulness
you.
and coming in, and looking
Appreciate
forward to continued conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Okay, this is going to be an interesting here.
Okay, we're gonna move on to our last specific item, a discussion on budget notes and amendments. Colleagues, continuing our discussions of the fiscal 24-25 budget. Today we have set aside time to discuss counselor budget notes and amendments. As you will recall, counselor budget notes and amendments were originally presented at our April 16th meeting and reviewed in depth at our April 25th meeting. Today's discussion provides time to discuss updates and changes to those notes and amendments, as well as an opportunity to hear about one additional budget amendment I submitted since then. We will vote on counselor budget notes and amendments on June 6th at our regular business meeting. And today I'll start with Counselor Simpson, and then move on to Counselor Lewis, and then I guess end with myself to review our notes. Counselor Simpson, any updates?
Yes, thank you, Deputy President Wong. One quick update for the group. The price that I came in on my budget note was $41,000, but we're going to have to increase that to $45,000, a whole $4,000.
Second.
And I was able to secure some verbal agreements between our partner agencies, TriMet and ODOT, to also add $45,000 to this class. So each, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But in the meantime, for my initial budget note, we will push forward with the $45,000 asked to the council so that we can get the class set up. And then from there, we will come through with a amendment with when the other partners in the IGA between us is secured.
Does that mean it's like funded for 3 years if other partners are putting in the same amount?
So I spoke with the instructor. It would actually add capacity to have more engagement with around the region and bring in more speakers for the class.
Oh. So it's, now we're spending 3 times as much.
Yeah, and the class was Portland focused, so it was titled Portland Transportation and Traffic. We're looking at some names. I think I floated to you all Regional Transportation and Travel Options course. So we would then be able to go all across the region, recruit, but also educate folks around the systems, transportation systems. So doesn't matter if you live in Clackamas County, Washington County, or Multnomah, you should be able to tap into that class as presented. And the whole focus is to bring in our partners because we are trying to create a new transportation system together, and we are also trying to educate our next wave of traffic engineers, advocates, enthusiasts to be a part of the future conversation that we're trying to shape now.
Well, thank you for bringing additional funding.
Just a $4,000 change, so thank you.
Great. Counselor Lewis, did you have any updates?
I have a few, yes, thank you. First, on the budget notes, actually amendment, not note, a budget amendment for using unallocated general fund reserve for capital that increases climate resilience. I've made one small change. Not only will we use the capital improvement plan, but we will also use projects that are eligible for direct pay tax credits as a prioritization criteria for those of us who are on the JPAC trip. Direct pay is something that, even though it's a tax credit and we aren't a taxed entity, is just as of a few months ago available to us. So if we were going to potentially get a massive, like 30% discount on certain projects, we should prioritize those to get the most bang for the buck. So I hope that folks are amenable to that additional criteria in that budget amendment. Second, I have, I don't think any substantive changes in the Washington Park Train Task Force amendment. But I did actually, in the third bullet point, specifically call out the question of electrification of the train as something that the task force will examine.
Is there a question about that one?
Oh, sure.
Mr. Chair.
Of course.
Counselor, with this task force, do we have a mechanism to assure that it's review, its input, its community input gathering addresses any potential increase in capital or operating investment in the context of the entire zoo operation. I'm concerned about giving one advocacy group an opportunity for its own little space to ask for something without having to consider in the context of, well, what can we then not pay for if we are paying for that?
Well, I am expecting zoo staff as well as zoo foundation members to be at the table. I would also suggest that there's not just one budget we're looking at in terms of the zoo budget, but if we're really going to do a full loop through Washington Park, that elicits to me the idea that Discover Washington Park and Portland Parks and Rec may also have applicable budgets. So this is about getting some truth onto paper around assumptions about costs and potentially starting to find solutions and where the trade-offs are. It is not about spending zoo budget specifically. Because right now you could talk to several different advocates for the full loop, and they would have different assumptions about how much seismic work needs doing and how much that might cost. Let's actually all agree with the same set of facts before we start trying to raise the money.
Follow-up question, if I might. I understand that, and I agree that there is a range of back of the envelope and all the way up to reasonably well-conducted estimates. What I'm concerned about is making sure that having gone through a very extensive public input process for the zoo master plan, we now are taking one element, or the way I'm understanding it, and I am hoping to avoid this, to take one element that some advocates want to use zoo bond money for, or other resources at Metro or the city of Portland to do, without putting it in the context of, well, is there more we could do at the zoo to meet pressing mission like accessibility and utilization across the region, or investing more in energy efficiency, or we've invested, there's plans already to look at producing electricity on site and reducing water usage, but are there other climate-friendly things we could be doing? It is, in my experience, when people are asked or put a lot of energy into considering, would you like to have this nice shiny bauble? A lot of people will say, yes, I'd love that nice shiny bauble. And you get a different answer, or a different percentage of people who want that shiny bauble when the question is, would you like that shiny bauble and are willing to give up this other shiny bauble, or maybe not so shiny bauble, but basic equity investment instead? So I'm trying to make sure that we structure this in a way that gives us an opportunity to honor our racial equity and our climate-friendly objectives.
Sure, and I don't believe that this task force is going to come back with one solution. It's going to come back having done some deep dives, and hopefully we'll be able to not only look at it in context of trade-offs with the zoo, but also trade-offs with, as you call them, shiny baubles that are externalities right now that we don't even have a grasp of, because frankly, I don't understand Explore Washington Park's finances. I know we pay in, what do we get out? Questions like that.
Okay.
We might just fundamentally disagree, and that's okay. But I feel like this is a question that is beyond just where are we going to envision this for the zoo? Because we've kind of decided what the train is for the zoo.
Right.
What is the train as a tourist attraction in Washington Park? Could be a completely different answer.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the explanation. I think we may disagree. That's okay.
Okay, thanks. And I have brought or sponsored another budget amendment around our social innovation program. And I am hoping Johannes Walde, our social innovation and partnerships director, can maybe just explain a little bit about what's in it, if you don't mind coming up.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to explain this budget amendment. So,
Could identify yourself for the record real quick?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm Johannes Wolde, the Social Innovation Director. I use he or him pronouns. The Social Innovation Program has, along with the Social Innovation Council, the advisory committee of this program, has made a goal this year to collaboratively identify and invest in a collaborative project. And this is primarily to serve as an experiential platform for joint investment. The goal is to combine resources from various stakeholders into a pilot initiative, which provides a testing ground for impact and learning. The requested $50,000 will serve as a flexible and deployable funds from Metro to complement resources provided by other stakeholders. A pilot project will be selected by the advisory committee or by the Social Innovation Council, which includes 3 Metro Council members, including Councillor Duncan Juan. So this is part of a joint effort, and it is based on best practice, a convening organization that brings the public and private sector co-investing in that project is a best practice. And we have a couple of projects identified, and we are meeting in a couple of weeks to select a project or 2 projects that collectively the philanthropy, private sector, and maybe other public sectors will collaboratively co-invest.
Great. Questions for Johannes? Nope, seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I apologize, I moved on from Councillor Lewis prematurely. So Councillor Lewis.
Looks like we may have lost her.
Councillor Lewis, are you? Oh, I see Councillor Lewis is in trouble now. Okay. Well, in that case, maybe let's move on to, any other questions or comments on budget notes? Okay. Let's move on to COO communications, and if Councillor Lewis is back online, we can finish that part up.
I see Councillor Lewis back on
Oh,
Zoom.
great.
I don't know if you want to.
Councillor Lewis, are you there?
Well,
Nope,
okay.
let's move on.
Thank you, Deputy Council President Wong, and good morning, afternoon, Council. Just a quick update for you. We continue to meet with stakeholders and our county partners to refine a recommendation for this body on affordable housing funding. I would categorize those conversations as productive and collaborative, and I'm looking forward to meeting with you soon to chat about how that concept is coming together. Beyond that, I don't have any major updates. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Lewis is on the other side of the Zoom. Oh, Councillor Lewis, are you back?
I'm back. My apologies.
Okay, great. Sorry to cut you off earlier. Did you have other amendment updates to share?
I do believe that Councilor Gonzalez and I got our amended language in for our WPES investments in reuse facilities. So we are both prioritizing the organizations that do reuse, that are looking for some stability, particularly since their cycle for funding is off of their need. But we are also working to prioritize funding for those organizations that are able to innovate on how they measure their tonnage that they divert from landfill. I believe those are the edits that we, there might be one other word change edit that was at Marta's suggestion, but I'm blanking on what it was. So then in addition to that joint budget amendment, the budget amendment that I've put in for arts and performing arts funding, I did include a more specific breakdown of our resident companies and the companies that we engage with to do community theater in the Brunish. And you can see that reflected in the packet.
Great. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, any final questions, comments on any of those budget amendments?
No.
No, great. And we've already done COO communications, so let's end with Councilor communications. Any updates? No. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn. So this council work session is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for Thursday, May 30th, 2024 at 10:30 a.m.
Recording stop.